We have now the Big Banger Sports Saloon cars, and they're on the grid now. The big three in this field are Peter Meadows in the Corvette, Ian Algie in the Alfetta, and Trevor Crowe in the Starlet. Although the first race today, Algie and Crowe didn't complete the distance, and Meadows in his Corvette was a most impressive winner. I'm sure that Algie and Crowe have plenty to say about their failure in the first race. Let's go to our commentators now, Tony Palmer, Brian Lawrence and David Oxton.
I think you're right, Peter, and that there will be much discussion about that first race for quite some time to come. I stuck my head in the steward's caravan a little while ago to ask if there had been a protest officially, and almost got my head bitten off to say that there was a great deal of discussion going on about several race incidents, and there will be an inquiry about the first race. You didn't see that, of course, you weren't with us then, but what happened was into the first corner, Trevor Crowe and Peter Meadows side by side, and they went through Champion and round through the S section, and then it appeared that Trevor Crowe got a little bit of a shunt and was off and out of the race in the first lap. A little later on in that same lap, Ian Algie in the Alfetta was out, and so probably the two people who were going to give Peter Meadows the opposition in that race were eliminated from it. Peter Meadows went on to win quite handsomely from this fellow. It's Rob Kennard from Christchurch, who was second overall. And in third place was Ralph Mossman in the number 98 car. But we've got a little bit of time on the grid before we see the start of this Big Banger race. And let's go back while we have a moment and just have a look at the finish of a very exciting Formula Ford race a little earlier in the day. David Oxton, this was classic Formula Ford stuff. We're on the last lap now.
Well, we've seen such a tremendous battle. Kevin Ingram's in the second car in your picture there, held the lead for pretty well all of the race. Shane Higgins took the lead, and then we got Richard Lester making a big last-minute dive down the outside of both cars. But then came this incident. The championship leader spun away his chances of victory in this race, held up his compatriot Kevin Ingram, and allowed Shane Higgins to go on to win a very deserved Formula Ford victory in this, the feature race of the Formula Ford calendar.
And the order as they came down to the line was Higgins, Campbell, McDonald, Ingram. And all happening on the last section of the last lap of that race. It was classic Formula Ford stuff with 4 or 5 races all together and going around corners side by side, and the desperate dice came in that last corner, the last time on the hairpin, with Richard Lester spinning around and taking Kevin Ingram, slowing him down a little with him. The Big Bangers now off on their warm-up lap. They'll come round and warm up on the grid proper when they get back. And we're going to have a race start, and I'm sure there are a few points to be proved with the drivers of the cars at the front of the grid. Brian Lawrence, always good to see Big Bangers, certainly from the crowd's point of view, but I know that the Formula Pacific drivers and one or two other classes get a little upset about the occasional little piece of oil they leave on the track.
Yeah, they don't get very excited about it. Of course, you know, Pacific cars a little bit lighter, putting out, you know, just over 200 brake horsepower. And I suppose it's a little bit like single solo motorcyclists complaining about sidecars. It is, well, it's a very spectacular form of motorsport. Regrettably, the attrition rate is, as we've seen it today, once again, unfortunately, it's quite high. It makes life a little bit difficult, particularly with something as prestigious as the Grand Prix coming up. And while it's all very well to win the series, it's something that the overseas drivers in particular look forward to taking back firmly wrapped up in their briefcase to support any driver vacancies that they're looking for.
I noticed in that first race today, Brian, that John Osborne was eventually black flagged. The car was smoking for a fair period of time, and the smoke got worse and worse, and obviously there was some oil being left around. He was black flagged. He came back and had some rather unsavoury words for the odd official, and as a result has been excluded from the second race.
Well, there's one set of rules for everybody, and I think that perhaps while all the gauges were reading the correct figures inside the car from his side of it, he was obviously unaware of the oil that was being deposited on the circuit, and this particularly the speed that they're travelling in, well, on any race circuit, it's a very dangerous thing to do, and the stewards obviously were just doing their job.
There's the man they've got to beat. It's Peter Meadows. He's in car number 14. You picture there the Chev Corvette, 6-litre V8s. Most of these front runners have 5 or 6-litre V8s, apart from Trevor Crowe in the Starlet, who's running the 4.4 version of the Oldsmobile motor. They're They're off around now, and they'll form up for a mobile start in this second race. Off behind the pace car. And they are, of course, hoping that there will be a little more semblance of order than perhaps there was in the start of the first race. This engine in Trevor Crowe's Starlet, the #1 car there, is the 4.4-litre version of an Oldsmobile motor, which was the forerunner to the 3.5-litre Rover engines and the Leyland engine that was used in the P76. Trevor Crowe has used them for quite a while. The only way in which they differ from the later versions is that they have more head studs and seem to last a little longer in the top end. He's got a 4.2-litre version of this motor, which is actually produces a little more horsepower, but is not quite as reliable. The one he's got in at the moment, just a tad down on horsepower, but a very reliable engine. Trevor Crowe, one of the better saloon car peddlers from around the country, pretty well known to most of our viewers. He's a garage proprietor and car dealer from Christchurch, an excellent mechanic in his own right, and quite a good builder of cars. That's Starlet in its second season. It is the second Starlet shell that he has built up, all seam welded, of course, but with the amount of horsepower that they're putting through it, it still gets a little twisted now and again. Peter Meadows right behind him. Rob Kennard behind him in the purple Cortina Chev. Ralph Mossman there in number 98 car. And that car number 6 is Steve Vigers of Christchurch in the ex-Avon Hyde 350 Chev-powered Commodore. You'll see a little Escort, a little light yellow-coloured Escort. Just behind these cars, that's the one there. That's Bruce Mannon from the North Shore in Auckland here, who's in partnership in a business with another fellow called John Butler, who's very clever at setting up cars and suspension, particularly saloon cars and rally cars. And Bruce Mannon does most of the engine building, and he's developed this 2-litre single-cam Ford motor with a turbocharger. It's a Garrett turbocharger they're using and running about 20 pounds of boost, and it is astonishingly fast for a 2-litre Escort. Surprises a lot of people, particularly at shorter circuits like Bay Park. Runs out of legs a wee bit at a circuit as long as Pukekohe. This is a mixture of the North Island Sports Sedan regulation cars, the South Island Oscar regulation cars, and 1 or 2 Group A cars that we've seen previously in the Group A series. Quite a conglomeration of vehicles that all compete under the big banner of Big Bangers. Certainly always a crowd pleaser. That's the car that Denny Holm was running in the Group A series. Bill Bryce is the owner of the car, and he is running it for a bit of a play, and says it rather frightens him to be in amongst these huge grunters. Coming down for a start this time. See if they'll get away cleanly. Trevor Crowe away very, very quickly indeed. Being chased by Peter Meadows. Kennard gets in front of him. Rob Kennard in second place. Peter Meadows. They've all got around champion cleanly at this stage. A little more sedate this start than the one earlier today. We won't make too much reference to that. Trevor Crowe, we think, is the man to beat. A lot of South Island, North Island rivalry because of the different regulations. They end up being quite even. Trevor Crowe up to the hairpin. Rob Kennard behind him. Peter Meadows in third place. Steve Vigers looking for every which way around the fourth place car there.
It's Brett Willis in the Commodore, and one of the traditional 5.8-litre V8s in that car makes it a very quick unit. Just to explain a little bit to you viewers about the difference in these saloon cars, obviously you can tell they're big, fast bangers, and that's exactly what they are, but they're designed primarily for sprint car racing. It would be fair to say that the drivers are non-conformists. They really like the rough, raw power and the brute force, whereas the Group A cars, which you've become used to seeing, they're more the long-distance endurance stuff, the very high-tech from Europe. Most of these cars are developed by the drivers and the mechanics in New Zealand, and they just have a heck of a lot of fun, and that's this inter-island competition.
Trevor Crowe still holding that lead as they go down to the end of the back straight into the hairpin again. An 8-lap race. drivers actually would have preferred a 6-lap race. They are designed, as David said, primarily as sprint cars. They're not intended to last a large number of laps. But my goodness, don't they go fast when they're on there. They have a higher terminal speed than the Formula Pacific cars, reaching around 160, 165 miles an hour in the end of the back straight. But they're not as quick in lap times. They're about 5 seconds down. Oh, Trevor Crowe running away from a challenge here. Rob Kennard and Peter Meadows there. Steve Vigers has got up to 4th place. And Brett Willis in 5th place still.
The little starlet that Trevor is now leading the race with. To you viewers, you will probably see it bumping and jumping through the corners as if it's trying to swap ends, and that's literally what it's trying to do. The reason being the distance between the front and rear wheels is called the wheelbase, and that is a very short wheelbase car. And with that sort of horsepower, it makes it what we call twitchy. And boy, Trevor will show you what twitchy is when he goes around some of these fast corners are.
Steve Vigers getting in front of Peter Meadows there, up to 3rd place. Rob Kennard still in 2nd place. We'll see if we can get a look at Trevor Crowe as he goes through Champion, because that's where the car is at its most unstable. He comes down the front straight, reaching ridiculous speeds. And that's what he has to contend with going round that bend, which he's probably approaching at around 140 miles an hour. Very, very twitchy. It's not a normal starlet wheelbase. It has been extended slightly, but still very short for the amount of horsepower that he's putting through this chassis. Well, Brian Lawrence, I know they've been called hand grenades and many other unkind things before, but the crowd certainly like them.
There's no doubt about it. The very large and enthusiastic crowd here at Pukekohe always up on their feet when big bangers arrive on the grid, that's for sure. And even though it's only an 8-lap race, they're certainly getting value for money. I'm a little bit surprised to see Peter Meadows so far back after, you know, very much an overwhelming win earlier on today, and he's way off the pace now. There's no way he's going to get anywhere near Crowe. In fact, I don't think anybody is. And Crowe has really got the hammer down. He's not letting up. We're checking the watches, and he just appears to be getting quicker and quicker the whole time.
Just have a look at Trevor Crowe again. You may have caught a glimpse of him in the first corner past the hairpin. Just an astonishing amount of drift, David Oxton. I don't know how you felt. I watched your eyes looking at that.
Well, it did look like he was going to run out of road. That was what we call the classic 4-wheel drift. The car was literally not understeering or oversteering, just bodily in mass going sideways. And I know Trevor thought that it was all in control, but probably to us it looked like he was just on the ragged edge.
Trevor Crowe frequently looks to the observer as though he is out of control, but he's a very, very talented, very clever and very experienced driver. Getting past back markers already. We'll see if we can get a look at him again this time. Comes out of the hairpin here and he gasses it up. Very, very quick in acceleration. And it's the next couple of corners where he was just absolutely sideways. A much tighter line on that occasion. I think he's got the pressure off him just a little now. He realises how quickly he's got ahead. And he now has the traffic to contend with the slower markers that he's lapping. An enormous speed differential between the quickest of them at 62 seconds, the slowest of them at about 1 minute and 22 seconds. Trevor Crowe making his way through the traffic. The good thing about this starlet being as short as it is and as narrow as it is means that he can change line in a corner. Not many drivers could, but Trevor Crowe is able to. Certainly more so than the bigger, wider vehicles that he's got around him.
Of course, it also has very good aerodynamic aids, as you can see hanging out of the back of the car there, the big wing. That does a lot to make the car more stable at this high-speed approach to the hairpin, as indeed all the top cars have some form of aerodynamic device.
Just 2 laps remain in this big banger saloon car race. The favourite with the crowds, Trevor Crowe, piloting that starlet through any which way into the corner, through the traffic, leading the race quite handsomely now. And that Steve Vigers has got past Rob Kennard into 2nd place. Kennard 3rd. A good drive from Vigers. I wonder if he had have been able to get ahead of Kennard a little earlier, if he might have made some impression on Trevor Crowe, because it's an exceptionally well-handled car. It's Peter Meadows who won the first race. dropping back off the pace just a little. 69 Roger Davis there, getting in the way slightly of Steve Vigers. He's got past him now. This is an interesting car as well. We know very well from Group A racing how well Commodores can handle, and this with a high-performance 350 Chev engine in it makes a very potent motor car. Avon Hyde drove and developed it last year. Steve Vigers of Christchurch has bought it now. Trevor Crowe through. The white car having gone through the track. We're looking back now to the gap to Steve Vigers, locking up the brakes into the hairpin. A good battle going on for second, third, fourth. Rob Kennard behind Vigers and Peter Meadows behind him.
Quite interesting to see the different lines being taken by these three drivers running second, third and fourth on the circuit at the moment. It varies by sort of up to about 6 or 8 feet in some places. Trevor Crowe still very much with the race under control, and the incredible little Oldsmobile engine Starlet bearing the scars from the earlier incident this morning, but he's obviously put that well behind him.
Trevor Crowe just lapping Bill Bryce in the 325 BMW of, as we said, the ex-Lenny Holm-driven entry in the earlier long-distance races. Gary Pedersen circulating in about 7th or 8th place in his Gemco Volvo.
Kennard there, and Peter Meadows. Here's Trevor Crowe. Quite a big gap now to second place. Steve Vigers in second place still. Watching Trevor Crowe as he pilots this amazing little starlet around. And the flag marshal out with the checkered flag, this time for Trevor Crowe. Trevor Crowe of Christchurch, the winner in the Big Bangers Saloon Car Series. An unfortunate incident in the first race. Comes back and wins the second race. There's Steve Vigers taking second place. Rob Kennard in third. Peter Meadows fourth. And Brett Willis of Rotorua will come through in fourth place. Fifth place, should I say. Well, this was Trevor Crowe approaching the finish in this little 4.4-litre V8 Oldsmobile powered Starlet. Has had an enormous amount of bodywork done on it before the aerodynamic aids were bolted on. A lot of seam welding, a lot of effort goes in to make it strong enough to stand up to the horsepower of a sizable V8. Very, very twitchy. Particularly into Champion, a very twitchy little car, but Trevor Crowe able to control it very well. A very experienced driver of saloon cars, a hard-charging racer. Second place going to Steve Vigers in the 350 Chev-powered Commodore. The Cortina Chev of Rob Kennard in third place, and fourth to Peter Meadows. An excellent race of Big Banger Saloons, and if you enjoy them, make sure you're watching the coverage of Manfield next weekend, because there will be a reduced but higher quality field. In other words, the back half of this field, where the speed differential is too much, will be dropped off, and we'll only have 15 or 16 of the front runners and an equal divide between North and South Island, so that rivalry can be well promoted as well. Back into the pits now. And there is the result confirmed. Trevor Crowe, Steve Vigers, Ron Kennard, Peter Meadows and Brett Willis. And I just referred a few moments ago to Manfield next weekend. The Big Bangers down there, as we said, they'll divide the field in half so that we don't have the slower cars in it holding up anybody through no fault of their own, simply that it was a free-for-all here at Pukekohe, as Trevor Crowe is taken around in the XK140 Jaguar to be shown to the crowd. Interesting car, that, as well. The first production car to have disc brakes. Trevor Crowe, a very popular man with the crowds, and a very well-performed driver in many forms of motorsport. He's driven rally cars, he's driven Group A cars, he's driven Big Banger Saloons. Let's see if we can get a word anyway with the Christchurch garage proprietor and car dealer, Trevor Crowe. Peter Williams is down there with him.
All right, thanks, Tony. Trevor Crowe, I suppose that makes up for what happened earlier on in the day?
No, it doesn't really, but it's still a pleasure to come up and be able to do something right.
Why do you say it doesn't make up for what happened earlier on in the day? You're still pretty annoyed about the circumstances regarding that incident?
Oh, well, that's part of it, but also really, you know, you come a long way to have a race, and it would have been really nice to have been able to race that first race. The result's lovely, but it's, you know, we're here to do motor racing, and I'd have just really liked to have been the first one as well.
I just wonder if a rolling start makes any difference.
I think it was very slow. You know, normally a rolling start's a lot faster than that. But yes, I think they're safer. That's why Group A cars have gone to rolling starts, particularly on the continent now, and they will over here.
All right, Trevor Crowe, good luck for next weekend in Manfield.
Thanks very much.
Okay.